Well, hello class. Today we are going to be covering how to do motion tweening, classic tweening, and shape tweening with the use of Flash. You'll see the file that I have here is one of the introductory files from Chapter 5. And taking a look at what we have available to us, you'll notice down here in the layer editor, there's actually several different layers already created for us. If you're trying to figure out what actually is on each layer, you can always click on the little dot below the eyeball, and that will turn on and turn off the various items that are located on each layer. Now you'll see that things are located on different layers, mostly because on one layer you can have one motion tweened or classic tweened or shaped tweened object. You cannot have multiple symbols or objects on one layer that is going to have a tween applied to it. If we're going to do a basic animation, which is what we're going to get started with here, there are two different types of animations to create with symbols. So you'll see I've right-clicked on any one of these layers just to show you the menus here. Up here at the top you can see there's a Create Motion Tween and there's a Create Classic Tween. So I'll take you through the process of the differences between these two tweens, and then lastly you'll see there's a Create Shape Tween, of which is grayed out at this time because the object that I currently did this for happens to be the text called Takeoff Text, and that text is not of a bitmapped shape object. It actually is of a text object, which is otherwise known as a grouped object. It's not a symbol, but it's not a bitmapped or a dotted or pixelated object. So the goal here is to have this airplane take off at frame 1, somewhere in between here, come to the apex or the height of it, and then at the end of the animation to end over here. You can kind of see on the diagram layer, this is where those pictures are located as well as the dotted line that we are intending on following for the animation to take place. Okay. Over here in the library, please note what we have available to us. There's a sun, the shadow of the airplane, a moon, a cloud, which you can't see because it's white, the bird, as well as an airplane. Alright, moving forward, our first goal here is to say that this animation is going to take us about 30 frames. So the minute I leave frame 1, what's going to happen is I'm going to lose my background as well as anything that I would like to take place for all 30 frames. So what we're going to do is we are actually going to click on frame 30 for both the diagram and the background layer. So I'm going to click and drag to select both of these. In Flash, be very careful. If you click and drag, it tries to move your frame. So just be very certain that all you're doing is clicking and dragging with an initial selection when you're trying to select a particular frame. Now there are multiple ways to go about extending the background and the diagram, this dotted line, those airplanes, to frame 30. One way is to press the F5 key on your keyboard on a PC. The F5 key will create us a frame. Another way to do this is go to Insert, Timeline, and there's Frame. And you'll see right there, there's the shortcut key for Frame. Perfect. So now, if I were to go and play my animation, I can do so by pressing the little triangle play button right here. What's going to happen is, as it plays, the text in the airplane that we see at frame 1 are still there, but as soon as we hit frame 2, those particular items disappear because they've not made it into the whole 30 frame progression of our animation. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we actually are going to go to frame 15 on the airplane layer. Okay, let's go to frame 1 actually of the airplane layer so you can see exactly what I'm looking at. The airplane layer, when I turn on and off its visibility, happens to be the airplane located over here on the far right side. At frame 15, halfway through the animation, we want the airplane to jump up to this point right here. You'll notice when I click on frame 15 of the airplane layer, the airplane happens to disappear. And that is because, as you will see along the layers here, there's no black dot indicating that it exists. The way we do a classic tween is we always create a keyframe whenever there's going to be a change in frames. So as I'd mentioned before, there's multiple ways of inserting a frame. Likewise, there are multiple ways of inserting a keyframe. One way is to press the F6 key. Another way is to go to Insert, Timeline, Keyframe. And a third way to do this is to right-click on the actual frame itself and choose Insert Keyframe. The difference between what we just did right here, where we inserted this keyframe, you'll notice that the icon is showing you a black dot, which basically is telling any other animators looking at your file, as well as Flash, that while we want the same object that was at frame 1 to be placed at frame 15, we're probably going to do a change of some sort at frame 15. In comparison to what we did in the first step, when we extended these frames, all we did was insert a frame at frame 30, and if you recall, that was the F5 key. The difference between what we just did just now is that the key shows a black circle that's inserting a keyframe, indicating there's a change taking place, in comparison to the original, which was inserting a frame, which has a hollowed out rectangle, which indicates just extend me, there's no change taking place. So while I've got frame 15 selected on the airplane layer, I'm actually going to click on my airplane and drag it up to where it needs to be based upon the diagram behind it. You'll see that your object will probably snap to it in order for that to take place. Okay, and then we're going to go to frame 30 to end up our whole animation. And once again, when I click on frame 30 of the airplane layer, the airplane disappears, and that's because nothing exists at this particular frame within our within our layers here on our timeline. So once again, I can right-click, choose Insert Keyframe. I can press the F6 key, or I can go to Insert, Timeline, Keyframe. Once again, the keyframe is to identify that there will be a change of some sort taking place, but do copy what you saw at frame 15 over to frame 30. So it's a duplication, and then at frame 30 we're going to pick it up and move it down to the bottom. Pretty straightforward. If you press the Enter key on your keyboard, you'll see that the airplane will go through a 3 different frame progression. At frame 1, when I click here, it's down in the lower takeoff location. Frame 15, it's at the apex, and frame 30, it's at the bottom. And again, pressing the Enter key will show you this. This process looks fairly stiff at this point, and that is because we've not added any tweens to it. We're getting close to it, we're just setting things up for that tween to take place. So, because we want a tween to take place between frames 1 and 14, as well as between frames 15 and frame 29, the easiest thing to do is to click on the word airplane for the whole layer. The whole layer then turns into a highlighted blue layer, and I'm going to right-click anywhere inside this blue area between frames 1 and 29. Not on top of the word airplane, but actually between the keyframes themselves. And once I've right-clicked inside of there, I'm going to go up to the Create Classic Tween choice. When you're done, you can click off, and that just simply means that this layer is no longer selected. You'll see that it's changed to a purple background with a solid arrow, indicating that a connection's been made at all of the black dot points that we've created along the way, and the purple is indicating that we are doing a classic tween. So now when I go back to frame 1 and I press the Enter key, it's a nice smooth transition between the different frames.